Julia's Fairy Tales. The Squirrels and the Hollow Tree. On the last warm day of autumn, the hawk took Pip's mother. Pip was the last of a late litter, too small yet to have buried a single acorn. Any squirrel who is industrious and thrifty and rises early shall find refuge in the hollow tree. His own mother had told him, and it had worked for everyone her mother knew. Gather early, gather more, gather alone. Pip did as she had said. He gathered early, he gathered more, he gathered alone. By the first frost, Pip had a cache as fine as any kit twice his age might bring, and he carried it to the foot of the hollow tree. The bark was dark and deeply furrowed, and the knotholes rose ring on ring from base to crown, each one stopped with moss from the inside. He called up. The moss in the nearest knothole shifted, and a face appeared. Old Burr, grey about the muzzle, his winter coat thick as a fist. "Too small," said Old Burr. "Come back when you are larger." Pip held up his cache. "Set it at the root," said Old Burr. "The wind will scatter it otherwise. We will mind it for you while you grow." Pip pressed the acorns into the hollow between two great knuckles of bark where the trunk met the earth. He looked up. The moss was already back in the knothole. The days grew colder. He ate frozen lichen. He ate a beetle he found under a stone. He stripped the soft inner bark from a fallen alder and chewed it until his jaw ached. When the first snow had nearly come, he went back to the root of the hollow tree. The hollow between the two knuckles of bark was empty. "Eaten by mice," said Old Burr, and pushed the moss back into the knothole. By the first hard frost, Pip had gathered twice what he brought before, and he carried it to the foot of the hollow tree. He called up. The moss shifted. Dame Acorn looked down at him, the longest tail in the tree, an old white scar on the underside. "Too modest," said Dame Acorn. "The worthy bring twice this. Leave what you have at the root." Pip pressed the acorns into the hollow between the two knuckles of bark. The moss was back in the knothole before he turned away. He gathered until his paws bled. He stripped every branch he could reach. He climbed to limbs too thin for his weight and shook the last acorns free. When the snow fell, he brought back a hoard greater than Dame Acorn had carried in the year she was welcomed. The hollow at the root was empty. "Foxes," said Dame Acorn, and pushed the moss back into the knothole. By the first snow, Pip had nothing left to gather, and what he carried to the foot of the hollow tree was all that remained in the wood. He called up. The moss barely shifted. Master Whisk looked down at him, white front teeth, the rest yellow with age. "Too late," said Master Whisk. "Too late in the day. The early squirrel finds the knot. Leave the hoard at the root. Sleep here. Knock at dawn." Pip pressed the acorns into the hollow between the two knuckles of bark. He did not leave. He crouched among the roots all night. The woods were quiet. The cache lay untouched beneath him. At first light, Master Whisk descended from the knothole. He climbed down the trunk to the foot of the tree, picked up the acorns in his teeth and in his paws, and carried them back up through the knothole. Pip watched him go. "Too early," said Master Whisk from above. "You woke the kits. The cache is forfeit." The moss closed behind him. Pip sat in the snow at the foot of the enormous hollow tree, with empty paws and the last 3 acorns of the wood in his cheeks. Above him, the knotholes rose ring on ring on ring. Every one stopped with moss from the inside. Through one chink, he saw a fat paw push the moss tighter. The moss in the lowest knothole drew aside. A young squirrel climbed through. It had been born inside and had never gathered a single acorn of his own. The moss closed behind him. Then a smaller kit came to the root. She stood where Pip had stood 3 times. Master Whisk leaned down from the knothole, white front teeth, the rest yellow with age. "We would have a place for you," said Master Whisk, "but Pip has taken all the acorns. Now there is not enough left to feed one more." She was born even later than Pip, in the last litter of the year, and no squirrel from that litter lived now but her. She had no name yet, for she had come too late to be named. She saw Pip, and her eyes went to the 3 acorns wedged in his cheeks. Her voice was small and sharp with cold. "You ate all the acorns!" She came at him with what teeth she had left. Pip is bigger. They fight. He had not meant to end her life. Pip dragged himself back through the snow to the foot of the hollow tree. He looked up. The knotholes rose ring on ring on ring above him. Every one stopped with moss from the inside. He opened his mouth. No sound came. Through one chink, Old Burr looked down at him, grey about the muzzle, his winter coat thick as a fist, one eye bright and interested. Pip lay down in the snow at the root where 3 times he had pressed his cachet. The 3 acorns were still in his cheeks. By morning he was frozen, and the acorns with him. The snow thinned, and water ran down the bark of the hollow tree, and pooled in the hollow between the 2 great knuckles at the root. The tree stood whole and warm. The squirrels within were fat and well, welcoming the new year's spring. Julia's Fairy Tales. If this tale stayed with you, like and subscribe. More fairy tales to come.